All right. Hello, everyone. So sorry about all the technical difficulties, but I am super excited that y'all are here for APIs 101 with Postman. My name is Andrea Chen, and I am a student community manager here at Postman. The best way to reach me is my email, andrea.chen@postman.com. As a student community manager, I'm here to help support you all as students, whether that's your career, your technical skills, or building your student community on campuses. I'm really passionate about working with students, and I am excited to get to talk to y'all today about APIs, Postman, and finally, opportunities for students that we have. Also, this workshop is interactive, so at any point, feel free to stop me if you have any questions. And then there will be a hands-on interactive portion, which I'll talk about right here in the agenda. So first, we'll talk about intro to APIs and Postman. Then we'll dive deeper with getting requests and responses. And finally, we'll try things out, letting you actually use Postman. And then we have some follow-up resources we'll share. And then we have some questions and answers that we'll take at the end. Before I get started, though, I'm curious to know how many of y'all know about APIs? If you know about APIs, I get a thumbs up reaction in the Zoom chat or in the Zoom? For those of y'all familiar with APIs, it's okay if you're not familiar with APIs. The good thing is that this workshop will be a great opportunity for you to learn about APIs and walk away feeling familiar just like everyone else. Another question I have before we get started is how many of y'all know about Postman, or is this the first time you've heard about Postman? If you haven't heard about Postman, could you get a open mouth reaction for me if you have not heard about Postman? All right, okay. It seems like most of y'all know about Postman then. All right. So this could potentially be a refresher or a deep dive into APIs, however y'all would like it to be. But now we'll just talk about APIs as if it was a digital restaurant. So when you go into a restaurant, you tell your waiter what you want to order. The waiter processes this order and goes back to the kitchen. The kitchen then returns the food back to the waiter, and then the waiter returns it back to you. As you can see in this digital restaurant, this mimics the client API server relationship. You are a client telling the API, the waiter, what you'd like to order. The waiter does whatever they need to do, or the API, to return information back from the server or the kitchen to get you your food back to you, or whatever information you're requesting as the client. You don't necessarily need to know what is happening between the API and the server to get what you're looking for, but you know that if you communicate with the API in the way that the API is asking for, you'll get what you're looking for. So when you go to the restaurant and you tell the waiter, I'd like a hamburger, the waiter will do, whatever they need to do to get your hamburger. You just know that if you've communicated with them, they'll get you your food back to you. If you tell your waiter, I would like a shoe, they might not be able to understand that, similar to how an API will not be able to understand that. So you need to communicate with your API or your waiter properly in order to get what you're looking for back. So what is an API? An API is an application programming interface that allows services to communicate with each other. Software has become more complex and collaborative over the years, allowing developers to no longer need to create every single service from scratch. This means that APIs allow developers to access data from a service like Google or Twitter without any knowledge of how the codebase has been implemented. So APIs are pretty powerful in the sense of if you have an awesome idea, you don't necessarily need to know how to build Twitter. All you really need to know how to do is call the Twitter API. APIs allow you to use code in chunks. So if you have a cool idea to be able to use Twitter to tweet out the weather information, you don't have to build Twitter. You just know that if you call the Twitter API the right way, it'll tweet it out for you, meaning you have the opportunity to build however you want to build, all with a little bit of code. So now let's look at APIs in a little bit more of a technical sense. Billions of people own smartphones and use them to share photos on social networks. This wouldn't be possible without APIs. Sharing photos using a mobile social network application involves the use of different types of APIs. First, to take a photo, the social networking mobile application uses the smartphone camera via its API. Then through its API, it can use some image library embedded in the application to invert the photo's colors. And eventually it shares a modified photo by sending it to a server application hosted on a social networking server using a remote API accessible via a network, usually the internet. So in this scenario, we have three different types of APIs. which are a hardware API, the API on your smartphone camera. We have the library API, as well as a remote API connecting to the server. So there's an API for everything. This is just a small list of APIs that we've included. Some APIs out here are Spotify, Twitter, Google, Facebook. Does anyone want to share a API that they like, either that's on this list or an API that is not on this list? Could you all drop some chats in the Zoom for APIs that you've heard of or APIs that you like? Anyone know any other APIs? Just put it in the chat. Geolocation API, very cool. What's one more API that y'all know? Assembly AI, awesome. What does Assembly AI do? Speech to text. Yeah, no, that'd be very useful and cool, right? If you can call the API to process that function for you, there's a lot of cool things you can do. And especially at a hackathon, APIs are a fantastic way for you to get started because there's not a lot of time for y'all to code, but if you can leverage an API to do something for you, combine it with another API, you kind of have an idea all ready to go and kind of built. That's very cool. So APIs, like I said, turn software into Lego bricks. How many of y'all here have played with Lego bricks or are familiar with Lego bricks? Feel free to drop a reaction for Lego bricks. I know that this is, a very common story as software engineers and technologists, that we say our origin story started because we started using Lego bricks as children, and now we want to build things similar to how we build with Lego bricks. Lego bricks allow us to use one block to build a wide variety of things, from rocket ships to buildings to cars to castles. And if you built a castle with a Lego brick, you could completely destroy it from scratch to start something new, allowing you to kind of transform or replace it in parts. APIs operate in the same way, in the sense of you can use these code chunks to build differently or build in new ways to build whatever you want to build. Really, whatever and however you want to use APIs, the power is all up to you. So what is Postman? Postman is a collaborative API development platform that simplifies creating, using, and testing APIs with the UI. 98% of Fortune 500 organizations use Postman, and 65% of Global 2000 organizations use Postman. This is just a small list of companies that use Postman. Some companies here that we're going to call out right now are just Grubhub, Uber, Atlassian, Comcast. As you can see, Postman is a widely used industry tool used by over 500,000 organizations and 13 million developers. If this is not your first time using Postman, well, welcome to the Postman community. We're super excited to have you and start using our product. So before we get a little bit further, let's take a look at how it was to work with APIs then and now. On the left side, we have the curl and the command line, and then on the right side, we have Postman. There's nothing wrong with using the curl or the command line to use APIs or test APIs, but as you can see, it's kind of difficult to use if you're not familiar with the command line. It's also very hard to understand what is happening. There's a lot of text to read, and you have to be, like I said, familiar with the command line. But on the right, we have Postman, which provides a UI for being able to interact with Postman. This makes it really easy for you to understand the request you sent, as well as see what response you're getting back and all the information that you're looking for, from status to latency time and how your request happened when Postman sent it. I don't know about y'all, but which one do you kind of prefer to use, the left or the right? Could I get a reaction for those who like the command line? There's nothing wrong with it. You really are just hacker energy out here with the command line. And then for those of y'all who are more interested in a UI to deal with APIs, could I get another reaction? So if you like the command line, let's put a clapping emoji. And if you like the Postman UI or are more interested in interacting with APIs through a UI, let's do the wow emoji. All right, okay. I see y'all. We like the UI. So let's talk about that now. Let's dive into it. So we have requests and responses. So a client is an entity that makes a request to a server. Some examples of clients are applications like web browsers. A server controls resources and services. An API is an interface that exposes these resources and services to clients in a network. The client can interact with an API by making requests over the network to the API. The API will then evaluate the request, perform the required operations, maybe interact with the database or other APIs, and then send back a response to the client. Postman is a client that allows you to make requests and view responses from servers. As you can see in this diagram, the client makes a request over the network to the API. The API then communicates it to the server. The server returns it back to the API and returns that response over a network back to the client. Postman, like I mentioned, allows you to make that request as a client, but also be able to receive that response back from the API and the server. So to make a request, we need 3 ingredients. We need a method, we need an address, and we need a path. These elements let the API know exactly what kind of request you're making and where to send the request. So without those three ingredients, we're not going to be able to make requests with an API. So once again, the 3 ingredients to make a request are going to be a method, an address, and a path. But let's talk more about what methods, addresses, and paths are. So when we make a request in API, we need to specify what we want to get out of this interaction, like an HTTP method. Methods are like verbs. They're actions. They let the client, like Postman, know what action to use for the URL. There's lots of methods out there, but the ones we'll be using today are the most commonly used: get, post, put, and delete. In Postman, the default method is get. If you can click the arrow pointing up, you can see the rest of the methods. The difference between put and patch is that patch is for updating partial data of a record while keeping the other data, whereas put requests are designed to completely overwrite the existing data for a record. In addition to a method, an API request requires an endpoint. An endpoint includes a URL with the path. As you can see here, we have our protocol, which is the scheme of the request, our host, which is the address of the server, and then our path, which is the destination where the request can be heard and executed. So as you can see here, we have our method, our path, and then our address and URL, allowing us to make this API request. Methods are once again verbs that allow us to tell the API what we're looking to do, whether we're trying to get, retrieve information, post, send information, put/patch, update information, and delete, which is deleting information. All right, so now we're going to be specifying detail. When you make an API call with the get method, it'll usually retrieve everything from the URL address. This can be pretty overwhelming. Parameters specify or filter out the response so you can get the specific data you're looking for. Next up are authorization options. Since this is a 101 session, we won't go over the full details of authorization. In general, authentication lets the API know what permissions the client has and determines what data can be requested. This typically starts out with verifying the developer/user. One of the most common types of authorization that you'll see, and the one we'll use today, is an API key. Other forms of authentication include access tokens, client ID, or client secret keys. Then we have headers. Headers are the metadata for the request. Some APIs require you to send particular headers that's not shown in the URL, unlike how parameters show the key value pair. It's common practice to send authorization data like access tokens and such in the header. Finally, we have the body. This is mainly used for post or put methods, but they allow us to tell the API what kind of information we're looking to send to them. A body can be sent to the client by the server in the response. A lot of data types can be accepted, depends on which kind of API you're working for. One of the most common data types APIs will often accept are JSON. This is what JSON looks like. If you haven't seen it before, we have the key value pair with the name Jane Doe, the email janedoe@email.com, and the birth year 1970. And finally, we have receiving responses. It's cool to be able to tell the API what we want, but we also need to be able to see what it looks like when we get the information that we're looking for. So when we send requests to APIs over Postman, we get a response. This information will include status codes like 200, 400, and any other information that were sent in the headers. We also will get information about the time it took to get the time it took to send the information to the server and get information back. And then we also get the size of the data. So I'm going to actually show you this in Postman. I forgot I work at Postman, so everything is Postman related. Okay, so as you can see here, I have a New York Times API. I have my method. I'm trying to get information back from this API. I have my address, my URL, and my path information telling the API what I'm looking for. I will send this request. And as you can see, I get my status information back right here, 200 OK. Does someone want to read out the time for me? Or put it in the chat, what the time that they see from this response? The time is on the screen if you cannot see it. I can zoom in if that helps. "853 milliseconds is the correct answer. So that's my latency time. That time just tells me how long it took for Postman to send the request and to receive the response. This is good for being able to test performance. If certain API calls are taking them longer than we expect, we can probably use this information to see what's causing that delay or where problems are being arisen. We also have the size, the response of this data that's coming back. As you can see, I get my data back in a JSON format. The details that match my parameters are this book called The Storyteller by Dave Grohl. Anyone a fan of the Foo Fighters? Fantastic musician. Have not read the book personally, but sounds promising to me. Postman also allows you to update your parameters and queries. So if I really didn't care about publish date, I could just remove that, send the request, and now I get all the matches that work with this information that had a rank of 1 and rank of 0. Other information that were matching the parameter, but no longer fit that. However, certain information is needed. For example, with the New York Times API, it does require an API key. So when I don't have an API key, I will get a 401 unauthorized because I'm missing that information. All right, enough about me showing you all about Postman. I think it's time for y'all to follow along and actually use Postman. I will drop this link in the chat. So y'all should see this Postman Student API 101 workshop. Now we're getting to the interactive part of this workshop. Could I get a thumbs up reaction when all of y'all see the Postman API 101 workshop page? Just to let me know where y'all are at. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to keep going forward. If y'all need me to slow down, just let me know by letting me know in the chat or turning your mic on, whatever y'all are comfortable with. So when we go here, we're going to actually go to the basics of API collection. We're going to go to get data, and we see that this is a request. But before we do all of that and get started, we need to actually fork this collection. So we click on this, create a fork. Forking means that we will be creating our own copy of this collection into our own workspace. We're taking whatever version this is and making our own copy. That's what it means to create a fork. I'm not quite sure why it's called a fork. I like spoons, but we will be creating a fork today. Yes, I can definitely zoom in a bit more. Thank you for letting me know. So here, we're going to click on these three dots, create a fork, identify and label the fork. I have already forked it, and you can choose the workspace that you want to create. I recommend, putting API 101 in your name. That allows you to see that this is the API 101 workshop, and then your name just to, for yourself. When you've already forked it into your workspace, can you all put a thumbs up reaction to let me know? Awesome. I'm gonna wait a couple more, just like 1-2 more minutes, give you all time to fork this collection. So forking, if you're not familiar with it, like I said, it just means to create a version of it for your own sake. All right, I see that some of y'all have forked it. So once you forked it, we will now go to our API. So this is kind of what y'all see, right? You see this, and you also see that request that we had. It says to add the URL here. Before I tell y'all, what would you recommend for being able to find that information? It starts with the word D and rhymes with mockumentation. Documentation is correct. Yes, Alan. So you are absolutely correct. In Postman, you can actually put documentation right here in the API in the collection. So right here, when we go back to it, we can see our documentation right here, allowing us to know everything we can about this API. So here we have our endpoint URL. That's the URL that we need to be able to call this API. We also have our paths, the quote, joke, and book. And we also have all the methods the paths can take, from get, post, put, and delete. So documentation really helps us understand how the API works. We'll be using this API for this remainder of the workshop to kind of start using the Postman methods, to use methods with the API to get information back. Anyone have preferences for which path we use? Do we want to get quotes today? Do we want to get jokes today? Or do we want to get books today from the API? Put it in the chat which one you prefer, quotes, books, or jokes. Jokes, Alan? Okay. We have 3, I know, very interesting choices. Quotes, jokes, or books. Jokes, preferably bad ones. You're gonna love our API because I personally think our jokes are very cheesy, but I'll talk more about it. All right, let's do jokes then. So to get jokes, we have to use our URL. So I just recommend copying it over, pasting the URL here, got some funky lines happening. There we go. So when we get this request to the API returns this response back to us. Hello world, status 200 OK. Maybe this isn't exactly what we're looking for, but we know that the API is working. If we go back to the documentation, we can see that if we want to get jokes from the API, we have to use a URL, but we also need to specify to the API that we're looking to get jokes. We did not do that since we just put in our base URL. So we need to put the joke path in to be able to get jokes. So let's do that. And then we get a random joke, ID 3, and their joke. First rule of programming, if it works, don't touch it. How many of y'all are able to get a joke back? Let me know in the chat which random joke y'all have gotten by putting the ID in. I'm going to give y'all a minute to test out this method and to make that API call. And then just put in the chat what your random joke was when you submitted that request. We got 0, 2. All right, sounds like y'all are able to get responses back, which is awesome. But if you don't want a random joke, how can we resolve that? Well, if you look at the documentation, it says we get a random joke with just the path. If we want a specific joke, we need to put the ID of the joke. So this time, try putting in the ID of the joke with your request. And you get the joke. If I want Emily's joke, I'd put 2 and see what joke Emily got. Joke 2 is question, who is a programmer? Answer, a programmer is a machine that turns coffee into code. These are so bad, but endearing in their own little ways. So now that we're able to get information back from the API, we can see what information exists. Let's do another method. Let's do a method where we can add a joke to this collection. I think y'all can do better jokes than us, so I would actually love for y'all to add a joke to our collection. What method will I be using to add information to the API? Type it in the chat or feel free to come off mic and let me know. What is the method that we will be using to add information to the API? Post is correct. Absolutely. Y'all are killing it today. So we will now be using the post method. Let's review the documentation one more time. To send a new joke, we have to put a base URL and our joke path. And then we need to give the JSON data for this. So I'm just going to copy this template right here. Go to body right here below our method, below our URL. Go to raw and select JSON since that's the data I'm trying to post to this API. Give it a random ID. So our current API has jokes from 0 to 3, but put whatever number you like. I want 99. I'm going to write my name as the author. And my joke is how. Feel free to find a random joke or create your own joke. We love jokes here. We're all comedians in our own right. Question, how do astronauts get their mail? Answer, they have a postman deliver it. All right, so you write your joke. Now send it. Oh, of course it did not work. I got a joke back. Can anyone see kind of what I did not do right now? So what I haven't done is I haven't changed my method. Very easy thing to do. So when I sent the request, the API sent me information back, but I didn't actually add any information even though I put JSON in. So now when I do post, I can actually add data to the API. So it says status 201 created. Here's the joke I just created. So what's cool about this is actually has loaded to a front end website where we all can see jokes being added to the API in live time. This front end website is obviously connected to our API, so as jokes are added to the API, it will be displayed here on our Heroku app. So take a moment to add a joke to the API using the post method. Don't make the mistake I did. The first thing you want to definitely do is tell Postman you are adding a joke by using post and changing the method right here. And as jokes get added, we will see them here. I'll give y'all a minute or two to post a joke to our collective joke repository. I know y'all have jokes. I know y'all are a funny bunch. And if you get stuck, once again, feel free to review the documentation. Always a great way of knowing how the API works. Documentation is how you will know an API works because every API is different. Every API takes methods differently, takes requests differently. The way that you'll know how the API does things is through its documentation. Oh, don't worry about it, Alan. You can totally just join us. Here, if you need the workspace, right here. Just looking for one person to post up a joke. All right, it's okay if y'all are feeling shy about your joke. You don't even have to do a joke if you don't want to do a joke. You could just put the word test. I would just really like to see that y'all are able to post information to the API using Postman. And if you have gone stuck or need help, please let me know. More than happy to help you through this. Awesome. We have a new joke. Very cool. A web developer walks into a restaurant. He immediately leaves in disgust as the restaurant was laid out in tables. Ha ha ha. We love a good table dib. Very cool. I will say you do want to be able to post a joke because we do want to be able to use that as a base for some of the next steps that we'll be doing in this workshop. All right, I'll let you all continue posting jokes. So now we are gonna do another method where we only update the data partially. What method would that be? So we have the existing data, but we want to just update the information. What is source field for again? Source field is just if you want to say where your joke came from. The documentation says it's optional, so it's completely fine if you leave the field blank. Yes. Source fields could literally be yourself. also doesn't have to be. It was just an optional field. But yes, props to you for reading the documentation to figure that out. So now that we've added information, how can we update information? What method could I use to do that? Feel free to put in the chat what method you think will update information. Alan, correct, patch. However, our API, unfortunately, will not be using patch. If we look at the documentation, we will be using put, but patch is a correct answer. But once again, if you read the documentation, we'll see what methods the API uses. Some APIs will be using patch and some APIs use put. It really depends on the API, but patch is correct. But for this situation, we'll actually be using the put method to update information. The difference is, so puts allows you to update information, and patch allows you to update small parts of the information. So if we go back to like there's a difference. I will follow up with I will copy this, follow up with you on this. I don't remember the difference off the top of my head. Okay, yes, no, there is a difference. So with patch, it allows you to update partial data for a record while you can keep the other data, whereas put requests are designed to completely overwrite the existing data for a record. So for example, in patch, like if you want to just update a field in a JSON, you could totally do that, but put is going to overwrite an existing data record. The differences are small, but in this API, we'll be just using put. So that's the difference between put and patch, where patch allows you to update certain parts of the record, while put will overwrite, will update the whole record. So we'll be using put to update an existing joke. So we'll go back to our API, change our method to put, and here I want to do better. So I need to give it an existing joke that is in our record, so that way I have something to update. Since post is adding a joke, put and patch are updating jokes, so there needs to be an existing record to be able to update. So I think I can do a better joke. How do astronauts get their mail? I don't know. They have a postman deliver it. It's not that funny. What about a joke about why, the classic joke. Why did the chicken cross the road to get to the other side? And then we'll just put that there. And then we don't get any content back with the status code 204, but it means that the server has successfully processed the request. If we go here to our front end, you can see that my joke has now been updated to this joke. I'm going to allow y'all to take a moment to update your joke if you're interested in doing that. And then finally, we will be deleting our joke for the final method of this API. So I will be using the delete method. Refer back to the documentation. To delete a joke, I need the ID of a joke. So I want to delete my own joke. I think, no one really needs to see this joke anymore. I want to get rid of it from the API. So I'll put in my ID for the joke, and then I'll send it. And now I see the message joke with ID 99 has been deleted. For whoever's joke this is, if you're interested in deleting your joke, try it out. If not, feel free to leave it so the rest of us can admire the joke for its masterpiece. All right, there's a lot that we did. We used 4 methods. Would y'all like to put in the chat what methods we used for this joke API? Can anyone name one method we used and put it in the chat, or come off mic, or whatever makes y'all feel comfortable? We used 4 methods, so I'm looking for 4 different answers. Get, post, put, and delete. That is correct. Yes, those are the methods that we used. Once again, these are pretty basic API methods, but as you can see, we're able to do a lot, from adding data to it, retrieving information, also updating information, and finally being able to remove information as needed. Feel free to continue, playing around with your workspace. The workspace is yours. So to recap, we learned API essentials from methods, addresses, parameters, not necessarily authorization in this workshop, but definitely will be in futures workshops. And then we have body data, where we included JSON information to update the API. Finally, continue learning APIs as a Postman student expert. Student expert certification allows you to be proficient in the essential skills involved in building and testing API requests in Postman, including sending more sophisticated requests in Postman, editing documentation for a collection, writing basic test scripts, running collections, passing data between requests, and scripting request execution order. When you become a student expert, you also have this opportunity to become a student leader in your community. The Postman Student Expert Program allows you to get a badge through completing its certification. If you thought Postman today was cool, wait till you try out the Student Expert Program, which allows you to, yes, I can resend the Postman link. So the collection is here, and you can fork it, so that way you can actually send requests and actually use the API. And then the Postman Student Expert Program allows you to learn more about Postman, from sending to writing more sophisticated requests, editing documentation, and writing test scripts. If you thought what we did today was cool, look into the Postman Student Expert Program, as it really will upskill your skills with Postman, also allow you to do a lot more cooler things, such as writing tests. An essential part of APIs is being able to make sure your API is working. And a lot of the way to do that is not necessarily manually testing it, but having a script test it out for you, so that way things are working appropriately. I will send the link for joining the Student Expert Program right here. And then now we have an opportunity to win amazing swag. So after today, we recommend, if you are interested in winning Postman swag, our cool astronaut logo, feel free to create a public workspace with a collection using any of your API of choice on postman.com. Send it to us, and we'll send you cool swag to the coolest project here at this event. So pick an API that you like. It could be the Postman Collection 101 API, it could be the New York Times API, a Studio Ghibli API. Make a collection on Postman. Show us that you made a couple of requests, and then send it to us. Email it to me, and then we'll send out the coolest project at this event, some swag. Stay social. We always love seeing what you all learn. Hashtag Postman Student on LinkedIn and Twitter to let us know what you've been learning and how you're using Postman in your education. We have fantastic resources from learning.postman.com, which is our learning center, explore.postman.com, our API network, and community.postman.com, which is our forum, meaning you can connect with other students about Postman or others in the community about anything API related. All right. This is questions and answers. Are there any questions and answers? Are there any questions I could take at this moment in time for y'all? I know I went through a lot from talking about APIs to talking about Postman. So if you have questions, feel free to let me know, either in the chat or coming off mic. All right, it's okay that there's no questions. I click on the body tab, but there's nothing there. Is this for the API? So the body tab will not have any information there. That's because the body tab is how you add information. So you need to give the body tab information. So if you go back to the documentation, you can see that the body tab will be taking this JSON information. So you can feel free to copy this and use it as a template to update this information. And then you go to body, go to raw since you're adding raw data, and then select JSON as the data type. And then now that you have this, you can use this to update your joke to add to the API. Great question. It is okay. Technical difficulties. I do want to be mindful of the time, and so I'm going to wrap this up. Once again, thank you all so much for coming. Please let me know how the workshop went. I'm going to put a feedback form right here. So let me know how it went. We're always looking to improve, and we take your feedback very seriously. If there's anything that y'all wanted to see in this workshop, please let me know. Anything else that y'all need, feel free to email me at andrea.chen@postman.com. Thank you all so much for coming out. That's all I have for today. I'm more than happy to stick around if anyone else has any questions about Postman, but if not, that's it from me, y'all. Happy hacking at HackNC.